Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, we're almost at the end of the first round of questions. I'll have an opportunity, then I think the Chairman will, before we have a break, just to let you know where we are in the scheme of things. So I want to take a moment to think about what we've covered in this first round. In particular, comment on where this began with the Chairman's statement. The Chairman said at the outset of the hearing that the American people were entitled to the truth about what happened in Benghazi, the truth about the security there, the truth about what happened after the attack. The implication of this, of course, is that the American people don't know the truth, that this is the first investigation we've ever had. The reality is we've had 8 investigations. We've gone through this endlessly. If you just look at the documentary record, we have the ARB report. We have the report of the Armed Services Committee led by Republican Buck McKean, which debunked the stand-down order allegation. We have the report of the Committee on Government Reform. We have the report of the Senate Homeland Security Committee. We have the report of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. We have the GOP Conference's own report. We have the report of the Intelligence Committee, on which I serve. Now, bear in mind, these aren't with their accompanying exhibits or the classified stuff, because it would be up through the ceiling if I included them. This is the report of our committee. This is what $4.7 million of taxpayer money buy you. This is what 17 months of investigation have shown. Now, the Chairman said, and he's a very good lawyer and a good former prosecutor. We have a lot of former prosecutors here on the panel. He gave you a great recitation of the number of witnesses and the number of documents. There are too many good prosecutors on this panel not to know that when a lawyer describes the metrics of the success of an investigation by the sheer number of people they've talked to or the volume of documents, but says nothing about the substance of what they've learned, that there's a problem. And the reality is that after 17 months, we have nothing new to tell the families. We have nothing new to tell the American people. We have discovered nothing that alters the core conclusions of the 8 investigations that went on before. Now, my colleagues have been saying quite often this week with amazing regularity that this is a fact-centric investigation. And I agree. So I'd like to talk about some of the facts which are centric to this investigation, because while the American people are entitled to the truth about Benghazi, they're also entitled to the truth about our committee. Fact. What gave rise to your appearance here today was many months ago a group called the Stop Hillary PAC, which aired an offensive ad during the Democratic debate showing the tombstone of Master Stevens, among other things, delivered 264,000 signatures demanding that you appear before us. Fact. It was the next day the majority approached us to have you come before this committee. Fact. After the New York Times issued its story in March, this committee canceled all other hearings except for the hearing with a witness named Clinton. Fact. We abandoned our plans to bring in the Secretary of Defense and the head of the CIA. Fact. We haven't had a single hearing from the Department of Defense with the Department of Defense in 17 months. Fact. Of the 70,000 pages of documents obtained by the Select Committee, the only documents the Chairman has chosen to release publicly are your emails with Sidney Blumenthal. Fact. Of the 32 press releases that have been issued since March of this year, 27 of them are about you or the State Department, and 5 are about everything else. Fact. As recently as last week, the Chairman issued a 13-page letter which alleges that you risked the lives of people by sending an email that contained the name of a classified CIA source. Fact. CIA told us there was nothing in that email was classified, nor was the name of that person who's well known to many. The Chairman has said that this will be the final definitive report. One thing I think we can tell already, there will be nothing final about this report. Whenever we finish, if ever we finish, the problem we've had as a committee is we don't know what we're looking for. But there won't be a final conclusion. There won't be anything definitive about the work of this committee because unlike the Accountability Review Board that operated in a nonpartisan way, it's unlikely the majority here will even consult with us on what their final report looks like. Those who want to believe the worst will believe the worst. Those that want to believe that this is a partisan exercise will believe it. As I said from the very beginning of this investigation, the only way this committee will add any value to what's gone on before is if we can find a way to work together and reach a common conclusion. But it is plain that is not their object. The chairman might say, ignore the words of our Republican leadership and ignore the words of our Republican members, ignore the words of our own GOP investigator, judge us by our actions, but it is the actions of this committee that are the most damning of all because they have been singularly focused on you. Let me ask you briefly, because I want to expand on just what I think is really the core theory here. I want to give you a chance to respond to it. You know, as a prosecutor, we're taught that every case should have a core theory and all the evidence and the witnesses go back to that core theory. And I've wrestled as I've listened to my colleagues today, as I have over the 17 months, what is the core theory of their case? What are they trying to convey? And I have to say it's confusing. I think the core theory is this, that you deliberately interfered with security in Benghazi and that resulted in people dying. I think that is the case they want to make. And notwithstanding how many investigations we've had that have found absolutely no merit to that, that is the impression they wish to give. Well, I have to say I'm a little confused today because my colleague pointed to an email suggesting that you weren't aware that we had a presence in Benghazi. So if you weren't aware we had a presence, I don't know how you could have interfered with security there. But nonetheless, I do think that's what they're aiming at. I know the ambassador was someone you helped pick. I know the ambassador was a friend of yours. And I wonder if you would like to comment on what it's like to be the subject of an allegation that you deliberately interfered with security that cost the life of a friend.
Well, Congressman, it's a very personally painful accusation. It has been rejected and disproven by nonpartisan, dispassionate investigators, but nevertheless, having it continued to be bandied around is deeply distressing to me. You know, I would imagine I've thought more about what happened than all of you put together. I've lost more sleep than all of you put together. I have been racking my brain about what more could have been done or should have been done. And so when I took responsibility, I took it as a challenge and an obligation to make sure before I left the State Department that what we could learn, as I'm sure my predecessors did after Beirut and after Nairobi and Dar es Salaam and after all of the other attacks on our facilities, I'm sure all of them, Republican and Democrat alike, especially where there was loss of American life, said, okay, what must we do better? How do we protect the men and women that we send without weapons, without support from the military into some of the most dangerous places in the world? And so I will continue to speak out and do everything I can from whatever position I'm in to honor the memory of those we lost and to work as hard as I know to try to create more understanding and cooperation between the State Department, our diplomats, our development professionals from USAID, and the Congress, so that the Congress is a partner with us, as was the case in previous times. I would like us to get back to those times, Congressman, whereas I think one of you said, Beirut, we lost far more Americans, not once but twice within a year. There was no partisan effort. People rose above politics. A Democratic Congress worked with a Republican administration to say, what do we need to learn? Out of that came the legislation for the Accountability Review Board. Similarly, after we lost more Americans in the bombings in East Africa, again, Republicans and Democrats worked together. Said, what do we need to do better? So I'm an optimist, Congressman. I'm hoping that that will be the outcome of this and every other effort, so that we really do honor not only those we lost, but all those who right as we speak are serving in dangerous places, representing the values and the interests of the American people.
Thank you, Madam Secretary.
Gentleman from California yields back. I'm going to address a couple of things that he said and then recognize myself. Because he invoked the family members of the four, Madam Secretary, and partially this will be for your benefit also, but I want to specifically address the family members that are here. There is no theory of the prosecution, Mr. Schiff, because there is no prosecution. There's a very big difference between a prosecution where you already have reached a conclusion and you're just trying to prove it to people. This is an investigation, which is why it's so sad that nowhere in that stack that you just put up there, where the emails of Secretary Clinton, the emails of the ambassador, 50,000 pages worth of documents, eyewitnesses, that's the real tragedy. To the family and the friends, when you're told that there have been 7 previous investigations in an ARB, you should immediately ask, why did you miss so many witnesses? Why did you miss so many documents? This is not a prosecution, Mr. Schiff. You and I are both familiar with them. I've reached no conclusions, and I would advise you to not reach any conclusions either until we reach the end. There are 20 more witnesses.